Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to episode 2 of Multi-Table Tournaments from the Ground Up. In this episode, we are going to be looking at pre-flop stack size basics. So just breaking down the different stack sizes and how we want to approach them. Okay, let's get into the video. So we're going to break this down into a few different stack sizes. All the different kind of stack sizes that you're going to encounter as you navigate through an MTT. We're going to start with a very short stack, which is kind of 8 big blinds or less. And this is how you should start to think about your chip stack when you're playing tournaments, is in how many big blinds you have left. We're then going to go on to the jamming stack. Now, a 0 to 8 big blind stack is also a jamming stack, but 8 to 15 is kind of where you're going to be on the cusp of whether you're going to have a jamming stack or whether you're going to have an open raising stack. We're also going to do 15 to 25 big blinds. This stack is generally known as like a rejamming stack. So when someone opens for a raise, it's going to be very profitable for you in a lot of spots to just choose to rejam or 3-bet all in with a lot of hands, or some hands depending on the ranges. We're going to talk about mid stack, so 25 to 50 big blinds. You're kind of gone past having a rejamming stack and into the realm of wanting to play post flop poker quite often. Then we're going to do mid to deep stack, 50 to 100 big blinds, and finally deep stack of 100 plus big blinds. So we're just going to give a basic overview of how you want to approach each of these kind of stack sizes. And just a note that's kind of at the threshold of each of these stack sizes. So at like the 15 big blind, you're kind of merging in between having a jamming stack and a rejamming stack. So I just want to make kind of a note that not all of these chip sizes or big blind sizes are, they're not stuck in the mud, basically. They can merge into each other, and that's just something to be aware of. Okay, so let's start with the very short stack, the 0 to 8 big blind stack. With this kind of stack, you're going to have to make a move pretty soon. So the way that the blinds work is they go around the table. You quite often have antes as well. So with one round of blinds going around the table, you're probably going to lose somewhere in the region of about two big blinds. So if you start with 8 big blinds and you fold every single hand, and the blinds go through you and you pay antes every time, you're suddenly in a situation where you're down to 6 big blinds. If you go through 2 rounds of blinds, then you're going to be down to 4 big blinds. So basically every time the blinds go through you, it's really hurting your stack. So you're going to have to make a move very soon, which leads us to an idea of looking for any plus EV spot. So the way that tournaments work, with them being quite soft, especially in the lower stakes, quite often we're going to be looking for pretty big edges, because there's not much point in putting your chips in with a very small edge when you're going to have lots and lots of opportunities to have big edges later on. However, when we have this stack size, we don't have the opportunity really to wait around to find those big edges, because by the time we may have found those big edges, we will have busted the tournament, or we'll have like 2 to 3 big blinds left, which, even if we manage to double up, now we're back up to 6 big blinds, but we're still within the very short stack. So we're looking for kind of any spot that is break even or better with this stack size. Generally, pretty much always with this stack size, you have one move, which is just to move all your chips in pre-flop. So you're not going to be doing any limping, really. You're not going to be doing any other raising apart from all in. You're not really going to be calling any others bets, which leads us to having no fold equity rejamming. So basically, if someone raises us, so if someone opens mid position and we're in the cutoff with 8 big blinds, if we rejam for the highest threshold of this, so 8 big blinds, we're not going to get folds very often, if at all, versus quite a lot of players. So that's what I mean by no fold equity. Fold equity is, the equity that you have in the pot because people fold and then you win the pot. So when we have no fold equity, basically no one's going to fold, so we don't have the added equity of picking up the blinds plus their bet when we rejam. So that's how we look at a very short stack, 0 to 8 big blinds. Moving along to the jamming stack. With this stack size, we're short, but we're not desperate. We can let the blinds go through us probably once or twice at least before we're starting to get desperate. Especially at the upper threshold, like 15 big blinds, we have the ability to wait quite a while until we have to make a move. So we get to pick and choose our spots a little bit more carefully than we do with a very short stack. So the way that you're going to want to work this stack is generally putting your chips in all in pre-flop. And we do actually have some fold equity with the higher threshold of this range. So kind of, 12 big blinds to 15 big blinds, we start to generate quite a bit of fold equity compared to when we have a very short stack. So we do get the opportunity to rejam with this stack. But in the most part, if you're going to be opening with this kind of stack size, especially at the lower end, kind of 12 big blinds and below, we're generally going to be just opening for an open shove if we're first to enter the pot. We still don't have too much room to call pre-flop, so we won't be doing too much calling. And yeah, like I said, as we get to kind of 12 to 15 big blinds, we do have other options than jamming. For those of you who don't know what this VPIP is, this is when we voluntarily put money in the pot. So if you pay a big blind or a small blind, you're not voluntarily putting money in the pot because you're forced to put that bet in. However, if you decide to limp or make a raise or make a bet pre-flop, you are voluntarily putting your own money or your own chips into the pot. And in this case, we call it VPIP. So when we do VPIP, we often want to jam, but at the higher threshold, definitely we have other options. We can min raise. We can decide to limp in some places if we think that's the best option. Okay, let's go on to the rejamming stack. Now, this is a stack size where it's going to be getting a little bit too big to just open jam very often. But 3-bet jamming over people's opens is going to be very profitable with this stack size, and is probably the main way that this stack size is played. And the reason for that is that we generate a lot of fold equity with this stack size because it's quite a big shove. If someone opens for 2 big blinds and we shove for 20 big blinds, they have to call 18 big blinds of their stack, which is usually going to be at least a fairly decent portion of their stack size, which means that they're going to fold generally quite a lot of their range. And this means that we deny our opponents equity. So especially like with lower pairs, they become quite good shoves in a lot of spots. I'm not going to go through exact ranges, so don't just start shoving 3-bet shoving pocket 2s every time you have 20 big blinds and anyone opens. That's not going to be profitable. But in certain situations, like all those lower pairs become really profitable because even when you get called, you're generally going to be up against, ace, king, ace, queen, and they do okay against those hands. Plus, we generate lots of fold equity, like I said before, so it's kind of the both areas make up our profitability. The fact that we pick up the blinds sometimes, and the fact that when we get called sometimes we have equity in the pot, so we're still going to win that pot quite a bit of the time. And, if we have a hand like pocket 2s and we 3-bet jam over someone and we get them to fold, 10 jack suited or ace 7 off, we've denied our opponent's equity because generally if they could see our hand, they would call, but against our range, they're not doing too well. So that's the way that we deny our opponent's equity. One thing that you have to be aware of with this stack is that competent players will realize that they can put you under pressure too by rejamming on us. So say we open the cutoff from a 20 big blind stack and the big blind has us covered and is a competent player, he's going to realize that he's going to be able to jam pretty wide on us as well, because effectively he's playing a 20 big blind stack, because that's the effective stack size, because we only have 20 big blinds. So it's something to be aware of when we do decide to open for a raise, is that we can get jammed on. And that kind of brings us to the idea of a raise fold gap. Now, the raise fold gap is if we open 40% of hands in a spot, say we're opening on the button, and if someone rejams and we're only calling 10% of our hands. Now, in that scenario, our opponents are going to be able to jam any two cards versus us and be really profitable with all of them. And that is because if we're opening 40%, only calling 10%, 75% of the time we fold and our opponent picks up the chips in the middle. So it's something that you really need to be aware of. If you can figure out that your opponent has a really big raise fold gap, you can start 3-bet jamming on them just super wide. And it's something to realize about your own game as well. If you're raising, even like, you know, if you're raising 25% of hands in a spot, but only calling 6 or 7%, your raise fold gap is pretty huge there as well. So you're going to be exploitable like that. So something that you guys are going to have to work on, and something that we'll go through in later videos, is these kind of ranges that you're able to develop so that you're not going to be exploited too heavily like this. We do get to open for a normal raise size with this stack, like I said. So min raise 2.2x, whatever you want to open for. And we also are able to have a pre-flop flatting range with this stack size. And it's going to be made up of mainly high cards. So because if we call a pre-flop bet, the stack to pot ratio, which is something we'll come into on the next video, is going to be quite low. Then we want to have high card value, because how the pot is going to play post flop is generally going to be you're going to be all in by the turn quite often, or at least you'll have very short kind of stacks left by the turn, or you'll even be all in on the flop. So what you're looking to do is flop very strong top pair type hands in this spot, because there's not going to be much play post flop. We'll come on to more kind of theoretical stuff about this later on, but yeah, that's the way we're going to want to kind of build our range, is mainly centered on let's have a look. So here we go. Yeah, we're going to be wanting to kind of be having hands around here. You know, if we're choosing not to 3-bet jam, we're going to kind of want to have these high card hands to be calling with. Now, I'm not giving you an exact range here. I'm just talking about the kind of hands in general that we're going to be looking to play. Are kind of going to be, you know, ace X, king X, you know, king queen, king jack. Those kind of hands that have 2 high cards in them, they're going to be a lot more profitable to flat call than a hand like 6-5 suited, which is a great hand, but not really in this spot, because, you know, you can flop great draws, you can flop flush draws, straight draws, etc., but you very rarely are going to flop a good made hand. So you're not going to flop a straight or a flush or trips or top pair very often with the 6-5 suited. Whereas with the queen jack suited or the king queen off, you do flop straight draws, etc. But quite often, if you flop a pair, it's going to be top pair, which is going to be a lot easier to play when stacks are shallower. Okay, so now we'll get into the mid stack, this 25 to 50 big blind range, and I realize this is quite a large kind of range to go for, but it's just a kind of general idea of playing a mid stack. We're mainly going to be two deep to 3-bet jam with this stack. So kind of 25 big blinds to 30 big blinds. There are spots where you want to be rejamming, but in general, we're not. So that means that we're going to have to play post flop pretty often. It is the best stack size for 4-bet jamming and against. So if we make it 2 big blinds pre-flop and someone makes it 6 big blinds, when we have less than 50 big blinds or even less than 60 in some spots, it's going to be difficult for us to make it like 15 big blinds and then fold, because we've put so much of our stack in the middle already that pretty much no matter how big our opponent makes it, if we have less than 50 big blinds, we're going to have pretty good odds versus them, unless you know that their range is aces and kings exclusively. So what happens quite often is that you're going to be rejamming over a 3-bet, which is a 4-bet jam. Also notice that same works against you. People can 4-bet jam versus you if you have 40 big blinds or 35 or whatever. People are going to be able to do that. We are deep enough now to 3-bet fold. So if we have kind of 18 big blinds and someone makes it 2 big blinds, it's difficult for us to make a raise size. Like even if we make it 5 big blinds as a 3-bet, it's going to be difficult for us to fold that. However, when we have 40 big blinds, if someone makes it 2 big blinds, we want to make it 6 or 6.5 or 7, whatever. We can make it that size and we can fold, which means that, we're going to be able to develop a range of like 3-betting with strong hands and then 3-betting with some weak hands to generate fold equity, and also kind of balance our range so that we're not just, if we're just 3-betting good hands and never have bluffs, then we're going to be fairly easy to play against. Our get it in range pre-flop gets tighter, and this is something that you'll notice as we go through the next few stack sizes as well, is that as the stack sizes get higher, our get it in range pre-flop gets tighter. So, at 50 big blinds, we might be looking at let me just clear that, at a get it in range of, versus some opponents, something like ace queen plus, tens plus, just as an example. And we'll look later on at how, what our get it in ranges are like with other stack sizes, but like had we been rejamming, we probably, with a 20 big blind stack, we might be getting all in pre-flop with a range as wide as like, depending if you're rejamming, you could be 3-bet jamming all this kind of stuff really easily in some spots. Whereas with 50 big blinds, this range is going to be, you're just going to be losing money if you're getting it in with this range very often. So as we get kind of deeper stacked, you'll get it in range gets tighter. And now we do get to call pre-flop a bit more, because we're going to be able to play a few more speculative hands, I guess. And this is another kind of idea as we get deeper stacked, is that you're able to play more speculative hands because you have more implied odds, which means that we may not have the direct odds to call, but the fact that, if someone makes it 2 big blinds and we call when we're 50 big blinds deep, there's still another 48 big blinds of theirs that we can win. Whereas if we have 15 big blinds and someone makes it two big blinds pre-flop and we call, well, now we've only got 13 big blinds left that we can call. So implied odds, basically, the deeper stacked you are, the higher implied odds you have, because if you stack someone, you're going to be winning a lot more big blinds. Alternatively, you get reverse implied odds, which is the same idea, except that it works on you, so that you have more to lose. So yeah, with this stack size, you're going to be able to be flat calling more hands like this, going down here, especially the suited ranges, this kind of stuff. More of these kind of suited connectors. Still want kind of some high card value. You don't want to be going down all the way down to here. But yeah, we're definitely going to be able to play a few more of these hands by flat calling in position. And that kind of brings us to position. As you get deeper stacked as well, position becomes more important, because if you think about it, if you have like a 20 big blind stack, if bets go in on the flop and the turn and you've called pre-flop, basically you're going to be all in on the turn or very close to. So in those spots, you kind of only get two times where if you're in position, you are going to have an advantage. Whereas the deeper stacked you are, the more likely it is that you're going to see the flop in position, the turn in position, and the river in position. And at each juncture of that game tree, you gain an advantage by being in position. And that's why the deeper stacked you are, the more important it is for position, because the less likely it is that you're going to be all in on the flop or the turn. And the more likely it is that you are going to be all in on the flop or the turn, the more your kind of positional advantage is negated, because, you know, once all the chips are in the middle, that advantage is gone. Okay, mid to deep stack. What you'll notice about mid to deep stack and deep stack is it's kind of just like a lead on from the mid stack, but just that the ranges get tighter in some spots and looser in other spots. So you'll get it in range is going to start to get tighter, you know. At kind of 75 big blinds, you'll get it in range might be something like this, depending on the player. Jack's debatable. But yeah, something more like this. So a little bit tighter than it was at 50 big blinds. We're going to have a fairly polarized 3-bet range. And the reason is that it's going to be difficult to do much else, because we can't start 3-betting all these hands, because if our get it in range is only this, and most regs will know that you're only willing to get this kind of range in, you don't really want to be 3-betting kind of stuff that plays really profitably as a call. So we're going to be doing a lot of like maybe 3-betting just like ace-5 suited, ace-4 suited, building ranges like that, and maybe, you know, like maybe 25% of a few other hands like this, just to keep our range balanced. But that's kind of more advanced range building that we're not going to go into yet. But just to say that, like, there's a lot of hands at this stack size that you don't really want to 3-bet, because if you get 4-bet, it puts you in a really awkward situation. Like the kind of mid pairs, good ace-x, but that can't really call 4-bets too well. All that kind of stuff we don't really want to be 3-betting at this stack size, because if we're 3-betting too much, which we are if we're 3-betting all that stuff, then will be easy to exploit. Okay. Like I was saying, position becomes much more important. And at this stack size, our implied odds get even better. So we're going to be able to start calling a bit further down here. You know, these 6-5 suited, 8-6 suited, this kind of stuff. We're going to go even further down here, especially when we have position, and especially when we have the ability to make the nuts and we're playing against bad players. So I'm not talking about always the absolute nuts, but with with these kind of hands, as opposed to 9-8 off, and this is fairly, obvious, but just bear with me. With a hand like 9-8 off, we have the ability to make the nuts with 7-6-5 flop. But if that 7-6-5 flop is all spades or something, then we have very far from the nuts. Whereas with a 9-8 suited, we have the ability to make a flush, which, while it might not be like as good as ace-8 suited, it's still going to beat a huge amount of hands. So that's why these kind of suited connectors become very good. And as we go down, like the reason why we don't play 8-4 suited, but we do play like 8-7 suited, you can say, oh, well, you can make a straight with 8-4 suited. And yes, you can make a straight with 8-4 suited, but you can only make one straight with 8-4 suited. So it has to come 5, 6, 7 for you to use both cards and make a straight. Whereas with the 8-7 suited, you can have 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 9, 9, 10, jack. You have a lot of different straights that you're able to make, so you're going to be able to make a lot more of them more often. So that's why we choose these kind of very focused in hands to be playing in position. The suited kings and queens, they become quite good versus bad players as well. So adding in some of this stuff, playing in position versus those kind of players can work pretty well too. Okay, so finally we're going to do deep stack, and now our get it in range is just going to be super tight. So our get it in range at this stack size is going to be, this, maybe not even that, depending on the player. So like that's a very, very tight range that we're getting it in with. So again, position becomes even more important at this stack size because we're deeper. We get to make more decisions with more information. We're going to be able to make better decisions than our opponent because we're in position and we get some free info. So position is even more important. And at this stage, getting in cheap versus bad players in position is great because we have such huge implied odds when we get in cheap that when we're able to kind of play a lot more of these kind of hands. So especially in position versus bad players, like you can start adding in, all this kind of stuff. Now, again, these ranges aren't exact. In fact, they're very, very far from exact, but I'm just giving an idea of what kind of hands that you're going to be able to play versus these bad players. And as you can see, again, it's mainly the suited that we want to be doing it with. And I mean, I've left out all these, but a lot of you guys are probably playing most of them in the first place anyway. But yeah, these kind of speculative hands become better versus these opponents when you're very deep stacked. Okay. Again, we've got a tight polarized 3-betting range. If you want to have a 3-betting range at all, sometimes in some situations, it's probably best not to have a 3-betting range because when our get it in range is so tight, it becomes slightly difficult to make, make ranges that are kind of not balanced, but, are not too bluff heavy. And especially if you have people who 3-bet pretty often behind you, trapping at this stage is not too bad. Obviously, if you've got people who call way too often, then at this stack depth, you probably just want to be 3-betting for value anyway and not 3-bet bluffing because, well, you've got an exploit on them that they call too often. So there's no point putting extra money in with bad hands when you know that they're going to call anyway. Again, we want hands that have the ability to make the nuts, which is why we're choosing kind of the suited connectors, high suited cards, that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's all the stack sizes that we've gone through. Finally, we're just going to give a little bit of homework, which is not very difficult this week or in this episode. And all you have to do, and there's probably a lot of you out there that do this kind of naturally already, but for those of you that don't, this is the time to start. And it's just to start calculating your stack into big blinds. So whenever you're in a situation, especially pre-flop, you want to start to calculate how many big blinds you have. Use a calculator if you have to. Hopefully most of you, if you practice this, it'll just become natural and you'll be able to do it pretty much off the cuff, which is, it's really helpful because you do get some really awkward stack sizes, but the more you do it, the more kind of natural it does become, where you just say, all right, I have, 30 big blinds. So I know I'm in that zone. I should be playing this kind of way. And you also have to kind of apply it to your opponents as well, because you need to know how many big blinds they have as well. Okay, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. This has been Owen Shields. I will be back with episode 3 soon. Thanks.